The UN Resolution 242 was the mechanism by which the international community came together and tried to hammer out some kind of an agreement on how peace should ultimately be negotiated between Palestinians and Israelis. This short resolution, however, is masterful in its use of diplomatic language and ambiguity. For the Palestinians, one of the great disappointments was that nowhere in the resolution was the word Palestine or Palestinians mentioned. It called for a just solution to the refugee problem. So that was how it was referred to. And as you recall, the Balfour Declaration had talked about Palestinians as the non-Jewish communities of Palestine. So they hadn't attained peoplehood or recognition as Palestinians in 1917. This, for many, 1967, was a chance to get the word Palestinians engraved in international law. It didn't happen. The United States and Israel were both eager to keep the word Palestinians out. Of course, for Israel, this is very important. Israeli prime ministers would insist there is no such thing as a Palestinian people because there's never been a Palestine. And in no international document does it claim that Palestinians exist. Therefore, the Israeli argument was there is no such thing as Palestinians, that these are Arabs, they're refugees, and that they could as easily settle in countries like Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan as they could return to their homes in Palestine. Secondly, another great point of ambiguity was the word the. The big question was from what territory would Israel have to withdraw in order to get peace from the Palestinians? The preamble of Resolution 242 states and refers back to the basic principles of the UN, which is the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war and the need to work for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. Now, it's important to remember that the UN, having been established at the end of World War II, was built on the idea that it would never allow another war like World War II to break out. And the war had broken out because Germany had attacked Poland, and before that, Czechoslovakia. In order to take German parts of those countries, it led them to attack the whole thing, and they began to move Germans into those countries and try to get rid of the local Poles and Czechs and Slovaks from land they claimed as theirs, and began to move Germans into those two countries. So this was the foundation of the preamble, which stated that land cannot be claimed through war. That was pleasing to the Palestinians. But the real blow to the Palestinians came in negotiating the first major sentence, which is withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict. Let me read that once again, because you'll notice there's a word missing here. Withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict. That's not the territories occupied in the recent conflict. And here is a sentence to show you how important the definite article can be. Because without the definite articles that defines territories occupied in a recent conflict, Israel argued it could give back some of the territories in order to satisfy Resolution 242, and not give back all of the territories it had occupied. The French, the Palestinians, insisted that the word the be placed into Resolution 242. The Americans and Israelis did not include it. In the French version, the word the is included. In the English, which is of course the official version of the UN resolution, it's not included. And that's why Prime Minister Begin, when he returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt in the Camp David Accords that were hammered out between him and President Sadat, with President Carter's sponsorship, he proclaimed after giving back the Sinai that Israel had satisfied Resolution 242 and did not have to give back either the Golan Heights which Israel had taken from Syria, or the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which had been taken from Jordan. Prime Minister Begin thus annexed the Golan Heights and Greater Jerusalem and increased settlement in the West Bank in an effort, what he called, to create facts on the ground. That is, a situation whereby the West Bank would never be able to be returned to Palestinian control. Resolution 242 also mentioned that freedom of passage through international waterways, in other words, the Straits of Tiran, the closing of which by Egypt had done so much to spark the beginning of the Six-Day War. So it was to guarantee the opening of those straits to Israeli shipping once again. Now, Syria did not accept and rejected this 242 outright. It had wanted a clear statement on the Golan Heights. By and large, the Arabs were very dissatisfied with 242. Nevertheless, it's become the essential framework for all negotiations about the Arab-Israeli conflict since 1967. The resolution laid down a clear commitment: land for peace. There were tons of differences over how that should be negotiated. The Palestinians, the Arabs, always wanted the UN involved in those negotiations. They wanted the Soviet Union involved in those negotiations. They hoped to impose international law on the Arab-Israeli conflict because they believed that law was on their side, acquisition of land was impermissible through war, that they would get back the West Bank and East Jerusalem if law were applied. The United States and Israel upheld the notion that there should be bilateral talks, that the UN and the international community should not be involved in these negotiations because they would be fruitless were it to be involved. Israel, as the stronger partner, was not going to give up East Jerusalem and all of the territories conquered. Therefore, Israel should sit down with the Palestinians. Only the two of them could come to an ultimate agreement. And under that rationale, the U.S. has led a number of attempts to negotiate peace between Israel and the different Arab countries, whether it was Egypt first, Jordan, and ultimately Syria and Lebanon. Syria and Lebanon have, to this day, not signed up for peace with Israel, but Egypt and Jordan have. The Palestinians also entered into negotiations in 1992 with the Oslo Accords. So 242 has been the framework. Only recently has it been brought into question by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has said that it's time to turn the page on 242, that the creation of a Palestinian state would be a great danger to Israel, that it cannot be done. And today, peace talks have broken off. We saw that at the end of President Obama's administration, Secretary of State Kerry gave an impassioned speech, in a sense condemning Israel for continuing to build settlements, which he argued would undermine the possibility of a two-state solution. He said that the days where we can negotiate a two-state solution are quickly running out.